The story began on a hot summer afternoon. I was working in my garage, sleeves rolled up, sweat dripping down my face, the sound of tools clinking against metal filling the air. Fixing cars was never just a job for me. It was my craft, my pride, my way of bringing something broken back to life. That's when she showed up. The woman who everyone in our neighborhood whispered about. Her name was Veronica, a CEO of some big company that none of us really understood. She drove the fanciest cars, wore the most expensive clothes, and walked like she owned the entire street. She pulled into my garage with her silver luxury sedan, the kind of car that screamed power, but that day, it was broken down, smoke puffing from the hood like an old kettle. She stepped out, sunglasses on, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, and before I could even greet her, she smirked. "Well, mechanic, let's see if you're as good as they say. Fix this engine and I'll marry you." The people standing around laughed. Her assistant laughed. Even the kids sweeping the floor laughed nervously. But me, I just stood there, tightening my jaw, staring at the woman who thought I was nothing but entertainment. It wasn't the first time I had seen arrogance like that in this neighborhood, but it was the first time someone had tried to use me as a punchline. I leaned against the hood of the car and said nothing. Silence can cut deeper than words, and in that silence, her smirk grew wider, as if she had won some invisible game. What she didn't know was that this car, this machine sitting helpless before me, was about to turn into my weapon. I opened the hood. The smell of burnt oil and fried wires filled the air. It was bad, but not impossible. Nothing I hadn't seen before. Her engine was complicated, like her life probably was, full of layers. But every machine has a rhythm, and once you understand it, you can bring it back to life. I pulled out my tools slowly, carefully. As the crowd of curious neighbors leaned closer, everyone loved watching drama unfold, especially when it was happening to someone like her. Veronica kept taunting me. "Don't waste your time. This engine is dead, and I'm sure so is your little dream of impressing me." But her words didn't matter, because in that moment, I wasn't fixing her car. I was fixing my dignity, my pride, and every ounce of respect she thought she could take. Away from me with her joke. Hours passed, my hands black with grease, the sun setting behind the trees, but I didn't stop. Not even once. She sat nearby, sipping on bottled water, tapping her nails against her phone, posting pictures maybe, anything to remind herself she was still in control. But little by little, the engine began to respond. The wires were placed, the spark reignited, and the silence of the garage filled with a low hum. And then, with one final twist of the wrench, it happened. The car roared to life, louder than anyone expected, louder than her laughter had been earlier. Everyone gasped, neighbors clapped. Even the kid with the broom dropped it in shock. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and looked at her. Her smirk was gone, replaced with something I had never seen on her face before. Respect, or maybe fear. She stood, almost as if the ground beneath her felt different now. For the first time, she didn't have a clever line. No cruel laughter, no mockery. She just stared at me, and then at the car that had come back from the dead under my hands. But I wasn't done. Because when someone mocks you in front of a crowd, when someone tries to crush your dignity, it's not enough to just fix an engine. You have to fix the balance. I handed her the keys and said, "It's running better than new. You're welcome." The silence was heavy, thicker than the oil stains on the floor. Everyone waited for her to reply, for her to find a way to escape this moment. But she didn't. She just took the keys, got in the car, and drove off. The sound of the engine echoing through the neighborhood like a reminder of what had just happened. The crowd slowly left, whispering to each other. Some smiled at me, some patted my back, and some just shook their heads in disbelief. Me, I just stood there in my garage, the smell of gasoline still in the air, and I couldn't help but wonder. That laugh she had at the start, the promise she made like a cruel joke. What happens when a woman like her realizes her joke turned into a promise she might actually regret? So tell me, do you think Veronica will keep her word? Or will she find another way to play her game? The next morning, I thought it would all be over. Veronica would forget about her words. The neighbors would move on, and I would go back to fixing engines in peace. But I was wrong, so very wrong. When I stepped out of my garage that day, a crowd was already gathered outside my driveway. Neighbors whispering, pointing, and in the middle of it all, Veronica's silver luxury car, shining like it had just rolled out of the factory. And then I saw her, standing tall, wearing a sharp black suit this time instead of her flashy dress from the day before. Her sunglasses still covering her eyes, but her smirk, that same smirk, had returned. "You really surprised me yesterday," she said, her voice smooth, but carrying an edge like broken glass. "But you also embarrassed me in front of everyone, and I don't forget things like that." The crowd gasped, some chuckled nervously. They all loved this drama, because in a neighborhood ruled by gossip, nothing tasted better than conflict. I crossed my arms and said, "Nothing." Silence again. It was becoming my favorite weapon. But then she leaned closer, just enough so the crowd couldn't hear, and whispered, "You think fixing that car was enough? But now you owe me, and I always collect what's mine." Her words crawled under my skin, colder than the morning air. Before I could reply, she turned to the crowd and spoke louder. "This mechanic here claims to be the best. Yesterday was just luck, so I've decided to give him a challenge. If he can fix something no one else can, maybe I'll finally admit he's worth my time." The crowd cheered like it was a circus, clapping, laughing, enjoying the show. And then she snapped her fingers, and her assistant wheeled out something I never expected. A broken motorcycle, but not just any motorcycle. This was vintage, rare, older than me. A piece of history that collectors would kill for. Its metal frame rusted, its engine silent. The kind of machine that many would call impossible to bring back to life. I stared at it, my heart beating faster, not from fear, but from the weight of the challenge. Veronica tilted her head, her smirk sharper than ever, so mechanic. "Are you ready to prove yesterday wasn't a fluke? Or should I just take this to someone who actually knows what they're doing?" The crowd roared again, waiting for me to respond, waiting for me to either rise or fall. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and placed my hand on the cold steel of the motorcycle. It felt like touching a ghost, but a ghost I could bring back. "I'll fix it," I said finally, my voice calm, steady. And in that moment, the whispers stopped, the laughter paused, because they all knew this was no longer a game. This was war. I pushed the motorcycle inside my garage, shut the door, and locked out the noise of the world. This was between me and the machine now. Hours passed. The smell of rust and dust filled my lungs. Every bolt I turned felt like unlocking a secret. Every wire I replaced felt like breathing life into something long forgotten. My hands ached, my back screamed, but my focus never broke. Outside, I could hear them, neighbors chanting. Veronica's sharp voice cutting through the air like a knife, taunting me, daring me to fail. But failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. As the sun dipped low, I finally tightened the last piece, checked the fuel, and with a shaky hand, I pressed the ignition. For a moment, nothing. Silence. The kind that makes your chest feel heavy. And then, a spark, a cough, a roar that shook the walls. The motorcycle came alive, louder than thunder, more powerful than anyone expected, its engine growling like a beast freed from chains. I opened the garage door, wheeled it out, and revved the throttle, the sound echoing across the neighborhood like a battle cry. A crowd erupted, jaws dropped, hands clapped, eyes widened in disbelief. But the loudest reaction came from Veronica. Her smirk was gone again, but this time replaced with something deeper. Anger, confusion, maybe even fear. She tried to hide it, but I saw it, and in that moment I realized this wasn't about engines anymore. This wasn't about cars or motorcycles. This was about power, and Veronica was losing. Hers. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but still sharp. You think this means anything. You think this proves you're my equal, but you don't know who you're dealing with. I always win, always. The neighbors whispered, some even laughed, but me. I just sat on that roaring motorcycle, staring right into her. Hidden eyes behind those sunglasses, because deep down, I knew something she didn't. Engines can be fixed. Respect can be earned. But once someone powerful feels threatened, they don't just walk away. That night, as I lay in bed, the sound of the motorcycle still echoing in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that Veronica wasn't done with me yet. She had started this game as a joke, but now it was something else, something darker, something more dangerous. And I found myself asking, not if I could fix another machine, but if I could survive the storm she was about to bring into my life. So tell me, do you think Veronica will come back with another challenge? Or will she finally realize that some battles can't be won with power and pride alone? unapproved modifications to my property. All lies, all petty excuses, but stacked one after another, until the weight of them pressed down like chains. Neighbors avoided me more than ever. Some even crossed the street when they saw me coming. It wasn't just Veronica, no. It was her influence, spreading like poison through every crack of this community. But here's the thing. She underestimated me. I wasn't just a mechanic. I was a man who had spent his whole life fixing broken things. Engines, machines, even people. And this neighborhood, this broken system of power and fear, was just another machine. I started watching, listening, paying attention, and what I found shocked me. Veronica wasn't just a CEO. She wasn't just a neighbor with too much pride. She had ties, real ties to people beyond this neighborhood. Investors, lawyers, politicians. She wasn't just here to mock me. She was here because she saw this place as another piece of her empire, and me by fixing those machines, by proving her wrong. I had become the crack in her perfect plan. That night, as I sat in my garage, the smell of oil heavy in the air, I realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't about engines or respect. It was about everyone here. Every neighbor too afraid to speak. Every family too scared to fight. Veronica thought she was playing a game of power. But what she didn't know was that sometimes the quietest people, the most underestimated ones, are the ones who strike the hardest. I wiped the grease from my hands, looked at the shadows creeping across the walls, and made a decision. If Veronica wanted a war, she was going to get one, but not the kind she expected. I wouldn't fight her with fists, or lawyers, or empty threats. I would fight her the same way I had always fought, with patience, with skill, with precision. Because the one thing Veronica didn't understand was that even the most powerful machine eventually breaks, and when it does, it's always the mechanic who decides whether it stays dead or comes back stronger. But as I looked out at those black sedans still parked under the streetlight, a question burned in my chest, a question I couldn't shake. How far was Veronica willing to go to destroy me? And how far was I willing to go to stop her? The black sedans stayed for days. Sometimes they left, sometimes they returned, but no matter what, their presence was always there, like a shadow pressed against my house. It didn't take long for the message to spread. This wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was Veronica's stage, and I was the fool she wanted everyone to laugh at. The letters from the HOA grew worse, louder, sharper, each one more absurd than the last. One accused me of keeping community, erase me from the story. But here's what she didn't know. I had already started building my own case, while she was busy spreading lies. I was busy gathering truths, photographs of her sedans parked illegally, recordings of her men trespassing near my home, copies of her ridiculous letters, and the signatures that didn't match on half of them. Piece by piece, I was building an engine, not of steel, but of evidence. And just like with any broken machine, once you line up the right parts, the whole thing starts to come alive again. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed all eyes, so I knocked on doors. At first, no one answered. No one wanted to be seen with me. But slowly, one by one, whispers turned into conversations. Conversations into confessions. An elderly couple admitted Veronica had fined them for having a bird feeder. A single mom confessed she'd been threatened with eviction because her son left his bike on the lawn. Another neighbor revealed Veronica had charged them double HOA fees with no explanation. And just like that, the cracks in her empire began to show. I wasn't the only one she had tried to break. I was just the only one who refused to stay broken. That night, I sat at my workbench, surrounded by stacks of notes, photos, recordings, and I realized something chilling. Veronica wasn't just trying to control us. She was testing us, pushing to see how far we'd bend, how much we'd take before we snapped. And the truth was, we were close to snapping, all of us. As I closed my notebook and shut the garage door, I caught my reflection in the window. My eyes looked different now. Sharper, colder. Not the eyes of a man just trying to survive, but the eyes of a man ready to fight. And for the first time, I felt a strange calm, because no matter how much power Veronica thought she had, no empire lasts forever. Not when the people rise against it. Not when the mechanic knows exactly where to place the wrench. But the question still haunts me. As the battle between me and Veronica grows darker every day, will the neighbors stand beside me when it matters most? Or will they hide behind their curtains until it's too late? The morning started quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like a warning. I stepped outside with my coffee and instantly noticed it. A thin white envelope under my car's windshield wiper. No handwriting, no return address. Just typed words on plain paper. I pulled it out slowly, my hands colder than the air around me. The note read, "Mechanics don't belong in palaces." My chest tightened. It wasn't just a threat. It was an insult wrapped in venom. Someone wanted me to feel small, unwanted, like an intruder in my own home. And the worst part was, they knew exactly what I did for a living. I looked around. The street was empty, but I swear I could feel eyes burning into my back. Every curtain, every window felt alive, like the neighborhood itself was laughing at me. I crumpled the note in my hand, but the words stayed echoing inside me. This wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was personal. Veronica had started a war, and now others were joining her side. Later that day, as I drove to the shop, I couldn't stop replaying that sentence in my mind. Why did it sting so badly? Maybe because it was exactly what Veronica had implied the first time we met, that I didn't belong in her world, that my calloused hands and oil-stained clothes disqualified me from standing beside her fancy suits and perfect smile. At the shop, I buried myself in work. Engines, grease, bolts and wrenches, the things that never lied to me. But even then, her face wouldn't leave my head. Her smirk when she mocked me. Her cold eyes when she said, "Marry me. If you fix this," like it was a joke. I tightened a bolt too hard and snapped it clean in half. That never happened to me before. That's when I realized it. She wasn't just in my neighborhood anymore. She was inside my mind. That night, I came home to another surprise. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was paint. Big red letters sprayed across my garage door. Go back to where you belong. The smell of fresh paint hit me before I even turned my headlights off. My hands shook on the steering wheel. This wasn't petty fines or sarcastic notes anymore. This was vandalism. This was hate carved into my home for the whole neighborhood to see. I stood there in the glow of my headlights, staring at the words bleeding down the door. I felt anger, shame, and something else too. Resolve, because in that moment, I decided I wasn't running anywhere, not from her, not from the HOA, not from anyone who thought I didn't belong. I belonged here more than any of them, because I built things with my hands. I fixed what they couldn't. I gave life to machines they didn't understand. I earned everything I had, while they only inherited or manipulated their way through life. As I scrubbed the paint with a sponge and bucket of soap, I kept repeating to myself, "You don't break me. You don't move me." But deep inside, one question kept twisting like a knife. If she had gone this far already, how much darker was she willing to go to push me out? So tell me, if someone pushed you this far, would you fight back harder? Or would you walk away before things turned dangerous? The red paint was gone the next morning. I scrubbed until my hands blistered, until the garage door looked new again. But no matter how much I cleaned, I couldn't wash away the message burned in my mind. Go back to where you belong. It haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, every time I tried to eat, every time I tried to sleep, that day, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. If Veronica wanted to drag me into the dirt, I was going to pull her down with me. So I did something bold. I walked straight to the HOA meeting that evening. Every seat was filled with polished neighbors in their best clothes. I could feel their eyes on me the second I stepped in. Grease under my nails, plain shirt, boots that still smelled of motor oil. And there she was, Veronica, sitting at the front like a queen on her throne. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just smirked, like she already won. The meeting started with the usual nonsense: hedge trimming, mailbox paint, noise complaints. But I wasn't there for that. I waited, quietly, until they opened the floor. Then I stood up. My heart pounded in my chest, but my voice came out steady. I want to address the vandalism at my house. I said, someone spray-painted hate on my garage door. Someone thinks I don't belong here. And I want the HOA to tell me if this is the kind of community they're running. The room went dead silent. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others looked down at their phones. But Veronica? She leaned forward, chin resting on her hand, eyes locked on me. How do we know it wasn't you? She said, people stage things for attention all the time. The words cut deeper than the paint ever could. Gasps filled the room. Some nodded. Some whispered. And in that moment, I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was turning the neighborhood against me. I clenched my fists, but forced myself to stay calm. Why would I humiliate myself like that? I asked, but she only shrugged. Why would anyone challenge rules that keep our community beautiful? People do strange things when they feel out of place. There it was again, that phrase, out of place. The same poison written in that anonymous note. The same venom sprayed on my garage door. I knew then. She was behind it all, or at least she had stirred the pot enough to let someone else do her dirty work. I left the meeting before it ended, the weight of their stares chasing me out the door. But as I walked to my car, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A black SUV parked at the end of the lot, engine running. Windows tinted so dark, I couldn't see inside. It didn't move as I got into my car. It didn't move as I drove past. It just sat there, like a shadow watching me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car sounded like it was slowing down in front of my driveway. By morning, I was exhausted but fueled with something stronger than coffee. I made a decision. If she wanted war, I'd give her one. I started digging, not with shovels, but with questions. I asked the old couple across the street if they'd ever had trouble with the HOA. They told me how Veronica once fined them $500 because their roses weren't uniform enough. I spoke with a single mom down the block. She told me Veronica threatened to have her evicted when her kids left bikes in the driveway overnight. Story after story, complaint after complaint, each one worse than the last. Veronica wasn't just cruel to me. She was cruel to everyone, but they were too scared to fight back, too afraid of more fines, more humiliation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was bigger. She wasn't just trying to push me out. She was ruling through fear, and I was the only one stubborn enough to challenge her throne. I sat at my kitchen table that night, piles of notes in front of me, evidence, testimonies, her pattern of control. Piece by piece, I was building a case, not in a courtroom, not with lawyers, but in the court of neighbors. Because if I could prove she was poisoning the neighborhood from the inside, if I could turn her own power against her, she'd lose everything. But as I leaned back in my chair, one thought chilled me to the bone. If she sensed what I was planning, if she even suspected I was building a case against her, what would she do to stop me? So I'll ask you this. If you were me, would you strike first before she has the chance? Or would you wait and risk giving her the upper hand? The night before the next HOA meeting, I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I was ready. Every note I collected, every story I wrote down, every angry neighbor who whispered the truth when no one else could hear. It was all stacked neatly in a folder, waiting for its moment. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the entire neighborhood. When I walked into the clubhouse the next evening, it felt different. The usual smiles were gone. The polite chatter was gone. People were restless, shifting in their chairs, whispering in low voices, and when Veronica walked in, heels clicking against the tile floor like gunshots. I could see it. Her crown was slipping. She sat down at the front as usual, but her smirk didn't look as strong as before. Maybe she knew something was coming. Maybe she felt it in the air. The meeting started like always. Rules, rules, and more rules. But when they opened the floor, I stood. And this time I wasn't alone. The old couple from across the street stood too. Then the single mom. Then another neighbor. And another. Until half the room was on its feet. I opened my folder and spoke, one story after another. I laid them out for everyone to hear. The roses that weren't uniform enough. The children's bikes that cost their mother a threat of eviction. The letters filled with fines for grass an inch too high. Every voice that had been silent for so long now echoed through the room. The more I spoke, the smaller Veronica seemed to look. Her smirk was gone. Her jaw was tight. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Finally, she slammed her hand down. "This is nonsense," she shouted. "Rules are rules. If you can't follow them, you don't belong here." Her voice cracked. The Queen's mask shattered. And that was when I said the words I had been waiting to say. Maybe it's not us who don't belong here. Maybe it's you. The room went quiet. Every pair of eyes turned from me to her. And for the first time, she didn't look like she had control. She looked cornered, exposed. The board members exchanged glances. One of them finally spoke up. Maybe we should vote. Veronica's eyes widened. No, you can't do this. I built this community. She snapped, but no one listened. The vote was quick. Hands raised, voices firm. And just like that, the woman who had terrorized the neighborhood for years was gone. She stormed out of the clubhouse, her heels striking like thunder. But there was no power left in her steps. Only rage, only defeat. The room erupted in quiet cheers. Some hugged, some laughed nervously. For the first time in years, people felt free. I should have felt relief. I should have felt proud. But as I walked home that night, I couldn't shake the image of Veronica's face, the way her eyes burned when she realized she lost. It wasn't over. Not in her mind. And when I reached my front porch, I froze. Sitting there on the welcome mat was a small box. No name, no note. Just a box. I picked it up carefully, heart pounding. Inside was a single car engine bolt, heavy, greasy, and scratched with words I could barely read. This isn't finished. I dropped it, the sound echoing across the empty street. The night felt colder, the shadows darker. Yes, we won the battle, but the war was still breathing. So tell me, if the queen has already lost her crown, how far do you think she'd go to take revenge?